जमहूरी तमाशा हो, जुदा हो दी सियासत से तो रह जाती है चंगेजी. Statecraft divorced from faith to reign of terror lead, though it be a monarch's rule or commoner's show. Ladies and gentlemen, with regard to debate in international, we have to take into account the epistemological aspects, and within very short time, I would give just few examples. For example, there is a noticeable difference in the connotations of the terms expats and immigrants. The term immigrants often carries a negative connotation, and it is typically used to refer the non-white individuals moving into predominant. Similarly, terms such as first world versus third world, assumptions of influential Western philosophers like Kant and Hegel, common denominator of Islam. अक़वाम मगरिब से न कर, ख़ास है तरकीब में कौमे रसूल हाशमी. Judge not your nation on the criteria of Western nations. Special in composition is the Hashmi's prophet's nation. Ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to a very stimulating discussion in this seminar today by our worthy panelists and dignitaries, and hope that we can learn from each other's perspective and we can learn from each other's ideas and utilize the information in our respective nation states. Thank you. So, thank you so much. And without any delay, I would like to request Ambassador Tariq Usman Haider Sahib for sharing brief remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a great honor and privilege for me to be invited to this August forum. My remarks will be rather concise. I would like to basically confine myself to the origin of friendship between Pakistan and Indonesia, and what I think is the way forward. I would like to say that the ethos, the origin of ideology of the movement for independence of the Muslims of the subcontinent, led by the Muslim League under their Qaid Muhammad Ali Jinnah, that one can find the foundations of Pakistan-Indonesian friendship. What was one of the well springs of the Muslim League and the Qaid-e-Azam? One of that was that from the Pakistan resolution onwards, before the actual partition and independence of Pakistan, it was not only to organize the Muslims of the subcontinent, but to project to the rest of the world, particularly the Muslims and those under colonial rule, that Pakistan wanted their support, and also Pakistan pledged, with or without that support, when it came into being or while it was in the formation of coming into being, would give the utmost support for the freedom of these people under colonial and other oppression and occupation. Not only, of course, in Kashmir, but throughout the rest of the world. And this was shown very much in later years in the Maghreb, when the national leaders of Tunisia, Morocco, and Algeria were declared as terrorists by France. They were given Pakistani passports, diplomatic passports. They were taken to the United Nations Security Council, and to the surprise of the French and the Western countries, they were part of our delegation. They spoke for their independence there. And similarly, they were given panas, shelter in Pakistan. These leaders, many of them lived in Pakistan as such. Now, in the case of Indonesia, they had been under occupation of the Dutch for so long, then the Japanese, and then afterwards again the Dutch tried to reconquer these territories at the end of the Second World War. The Muslim League had made a point of telling the British that while we are sending soldiers to fight in the Second World War against the Japanese and the Germans, and in both theaters our soldiers fought very bravely, they will not be used against any Muslim country or any Muslim people. But then, nonetheless, after the Japanese did their formal surrender and the 7th Army moved into Indonesia to take over those responsibilities that it had, the Dutch had asked the British to help them retake Indonesia. There were in the British troops a number of Muslim troops also. But I want to tell you that our ties are laid in blood also, because some 700 of these Muslim troops, they left their posts, they left their pensions, they left their families. They became, for the British, they were deserters and subject to the death penalty. But they left and they joined their Muslim brothers in the Indonesian movement. They took with them their weapons, they took with them their communication equipment, they took with them their motor transport, whatever they had, and they joined not an organized at that time force, but bands of, as it were, guerrillas or fighters of the Indonesian resistance. And these people remained there throughout the War of Liberation. At the end, they fought very bravely, and at the end of which only some 75 of them survived out of 700. And of these 75, although the government passed a law later on that they would be entitled to their pensions and all their privileges as if they had remained in the Indian and Pakistan Army all their lives and services, but most of them remained in Indonesia. They married, they settled down mainly around Bandung, and their families and their descendants still live there, and they're always very happy when Pakistani diplomats go there and recreate that sense of solidarity and friendship. And there were many engagements that they fought on, but one of them was that while the Japanese had surrendered, nonetheless they had troops there, and at one stage some of them saw the great leader Sukarno and they were going to arrest him, but the Muslims who were there, troops, they intervened and stopped that and wouldn't let them take him away, which he was always very appreciated very much. Then that is on the level of the people to people, army to army, liberation fighters to liberation fighters support. But then on the level of the leadership, there was a close friendship between the great leader Sukarno and Muhammad Ali Jinnah Ar-Qaeda-e-Azam. There was an exhibition last year by the Indonesian embassy and others out here, including Mushahid Hussain Institute, because his father was our first defense attaché there. They showed an exhibition of paintings and photographs and letters between the leaders. I would just like to refer to one where the Muslim League, of course, had asked for the liberation of Indonesia and the withdrawal of British troops, and where he thanked Qaeda-e-Azam, and he said in a very affectionate manner, truly from the heart, he said, "Dear Mr. Jinnah, I was worried to hear that you are not in good health. I pray that you recover into good health for the sake of your people and for the sake of the Muslim Ummah." That was the kind of love and brotherhood that was between the leaders, and that was reflected between the people of our two countries. That lasted afterwards, and sadly the founder of our country died. But President Sukarno visited Pakistan a number of times, and our presidents visited there also. and relations were quite close, and they remain more or less close. There have been little bits of ups and downs in the sense that they've been less close or more close. It was not that they were ever bad. And in 65, as is well known, President Sukarno in Indonesia, they offered submarines to guard Karachi harbor. They offered planes to come to Pakistan, jet fighter planes which were shipped on ships. But the war was not that many days and they had not yet reached Pakistan. But it shows a level of support and affection. And in 2000, and when the first Bandung conference took place, and there were 5 conveners, and one of them was Pakistan. I was very happy when I went to the Afro-Asian Friendship Conference in 2003 and 4 in Jakarta, that the Indonesian government had taken all the speeches of all the leaders of all the countries, including the Prime Minister of Pakistan, had published them in 2 volumes. It was a great historical feat, and I hope they digitalize it and make it more readily available. And I remember in their speech from Pakistan, because I dealt with the UN for many years, that the Prime Minister of Pakistan said, we would like, this is 1955, we would like the expansion of the Security Council, but only in the non-permanent category. No permanent, no new centers of privilege, no new permanent members, and that has been ours and the combined United for Consensus movement, including Indonesia, from that date onwards. But that in a way was the origin, the first public pronouncement of that on the international stage. So you see, there was a very good foundation laid, and it was continued also. But I would like to conclude my brief remarks by 2 observations. One is, and I think the ambassador or the Chargé d'Affaires of Indonesia will agree, that there is great potential between our 2 countries. That potential was there at the beginning, that was there in the first phases, that has been there in flashes in between. But to a large extent, there is a lot of that potential that still can be realized. There still has to be more people-to-people, not only Indonesian students coming here to be in our religious establishments and religious teaching, but in our universities, but in our technical courses, in our foreign level courses, but in tourism, etc. The trade is there. We have switched from Malaysia to Indonesia for palm oil, but we need to export more to Indonesia. And there is a level of friendship, of cooperation, especially in trade, which is the driver of today's bilateral relations, and in people-to-people friendship, which a lot more can be done. And I think we should all dedicate ourselves to that objective, to realizing, exploring that potential, analyzing it, and trying as best as we can to increase that. I would also finally end by saying that for the future generations and the present generations, more has to be written about the Indonesian-Pakistan friendship and how it began, how our ties and blood and between our leaders were there. And for instance, one of my colleagues, Ambassador Sanullah, Mia Sanullah, has written a whole book on it, his Indonesian saga, which has dealt with this. But unfortunately it is out of print, and he should, even now I implore him, to digitalize it so it is available to everybody free of charge. And our embassies in both countries should have articles published reminding the new generation of what has been done, and we should, between our think tanks, including the Muslim think tank and Indonesian think tanks, and between the honored guests here, we should encourage more scholarly writings on the foundation of this friendship so that it can be built upon. I think that is very important, to give that kind of infrastructure. So I think with these concise remarks, I won't take up any more of your time, but I hope I have laid the foundation for the beginning of our talks. I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I thank all the other speakers and our guests.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Tariq Usman Haider Sahib. And without any delay, I would like to invite Acting Ambassador of Indonesia, Mr. Ramat Hindiarta, for his kind remarks.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala khatamil anbiya'i wal mursalin Sayyidina Maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'du. Honorable Mr. Ahmad Bilal Sufi, Honorable Dr. Kibla Ayaz, Excellency Ambassador Tariq Usman Haidar, Honorable Chairman Kiai Haji Ulil Absar Abdullah of Nahdlatul Ulama, dear Excellencies and colleagues from ulama and Muslim scholars, religious leaders, diplomatic community, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum and very good afternoon again. First of all, I sincerely thank you for joining us this afternoon and for making this event more impactful with your presence. As part of the Indonesian Embassy's consistent diplomatic priorities in Pakistan, strengthening people-to-people contact along with economic diplomacy. Moreover, on behalf of the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia in Islamabad, I express my deepest gratitude and highest appreciation to the Muslim Institute in jointly organizing this precious event. Please convey my salam, my respect to His Excellency Sahibzada Sultan Ahmad. Inshallah, we will have further collaboration in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, presently Indonesia and Pakistan are the largest Muslim countries in the world. The two brotherly countries are also part of the big family of democracies. There are significant similarities of both countries that pave ways for further cooperation and collaboration to make great legacy in establishing strong bilateral relations by our respective founding fathers, President Sukarno and Qaid Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, increasingly relevant for both peoples. I totally agree what the previous speaker said on the deep relations between our respective founding fathers. However, we also realize that this story, if we tell it to young generation in full stop, it will make our relations not too relevant according to our young generation, unless we can fulfill the excellent bilateral relations with the more concrete works, namely in good economic relations and also strong people-to-people contact. And this event is part of people-to-people contact done by the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia in cooperation with all relevant partners in Pakistan. Recently, the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia has extensive visits to all relevant partners, madrasas, ulamas. I personally already visited Jami'ah Haqqaniyah and also visited Rewind in Lahore. Recently, I visited Jami'ah Binoria, met also with the Grand Mufti of Mudibur Rahman and also Grand Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani in Karachi. Indonesia is friend of all parties in the world which or that uphold the peaceful life and also harmony in the world. That's why Indonesian Embassy is open to build relations and collaboration with all parties in Pakistan. Recently also I visited Balochistan, met with ulamas there in Quetta. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia is among the world's largest democracy, a G20 member with trillion-dollar economy, and keeps moving to the higher level of contribution to the world in economy, and cooperation, as well as peace and security. Moreover, Indonesia is the largest ASEAN economic partner for Pakistan. ASEAN is a diverse region in the world with a population of more than 650 million people. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we hope that this event will be impactful for the people of the two countries, and the presence of Kiai Haji Ulil Absar Abdullah, Chairman of Nahdlatul Ulama, is energy for the embassy to always recharge our power to always give contribution to the strength to building better and stronger relations with all parties in Pakistan, especially in the field of people-to-people contact. As we are all aware that Nahdlatul Ulama is the largest Islamic organization in the world based in Jakarta, and with this status, we are all aware that the contribution from this largest organization in the world is always awaited by the world and international community. Thank you and enjoy the seminar. Wallahul muwaffiq ila aqwamit thoriq. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so very much, Your Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is ad hoc member of Shariat Appellate Bench of Federal Shariat Court. He is a former chairman of Islamic Ideology Council. In your warm welcome, I would like to invite Dr. Qibla Ayaz Sahib for the speech.
नहमदुहु व नुसल्ली व नुसल्लिम अला रसूलिहिल करीम फ़ाऊज़ु बिल्लाहि मिनश शैतानिर रजीम बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम वल अस्र इन्नल इंसाना लफ़ी खुस्र इल्लल लज़ीना आमनु व अमिलुस सालिहात व तवासौ बिल हक़ व तवासौ बिस सब्र सदक़ल्लाहुल अज़ीम. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our national guest of the entire nation, His Excellency Samahatul Shaykh Ulil Fashar Abdullah, the Chief of Nahdlatul Ulama, the greatest religious party of Indonesia. And on the podium, we have great experts of Indonesian society and history. Excellency Tariq Haider, and the Deputy Ambassador of our brother country, Indonesia, Excellency, for us like a brother, Rahmat. And then my friend, Ahmad Bilal Sufi, a great lawyer of international law and author of the latest book, Quranic Covenants, a unique book that we all should read. And we are guests of Muslim Institute, so we are grateful, very grateful to the chairman, Sahibzada Sultan, and the team which has arranged this distinguished gathering of scholars, intellectuals, and influential persons of Islamabad and persons belonging from other parts of Pakistan. I think that on the role of Nahdlatul Ulama, the chief himself, the Honorable Sheikh, will be shedding light in detail. But I will confine myself to the takeaway, the learning that I have achieved and I have got from my interaction with Indonesian scholars, professors, intellectuals, and the high persons of the government, including the former President, Excellency Joko Widodo, with whom I personally met, have the honor to meet, and have a long discussion on Afghanistan. Because he was greatly interested in bridging the gaps between different groups of Afghanistan. And he, all the way from Indonesia, came to Pakistan during the premiership of Shahid Haqqan Abbasi, and then visited Afghanistan in difficult times. And then he saw to it to invite influential scholars of Pakistan and Afghanistan and make them sit with the most influential ulama of Indonesia and chair the session by himself. So this shows the interest of Indonesian people in ensuring and in establishing peace in our region. So we are very grateful to the effort of Indonesian people and Indonesian government, and particularly the whole, the back of Nahdlatul Ulama, the most influential Islamic party. It was behind all these efforts, because the vice president at that time belonging to Nahdlatul Ulama, Sheikh Amin Maruf, was also all the way in the sessions with the ulama. And great breakthrough was made in religious diplomacy. And then again, the Indonesian delegation, having greatest scholars of Indonesia, Sheikh Zulfa, Sheikh Dar Qutni, who accompanied us while I was representing Pakistan 2 times to Afghanistan during the Emirat-e-Islami Taliban rule. And our 1 point agenda was education for women, education for the future generation. And the Indonesian delegation role was very crucial, because they are role model in female education. They are role model in women's education. And one of the greatest university of women in Indonesia was represented in the delegation by the vice chancellor of the university, who welcomed and offered to the Taliban, to the Emirat-e-Islami, that her university is ready to educate the Afghan girls within the abaya, within the Islamic and social norms of Afghanistan. So this was the greatest offer that in the entire delegation, Indonesian lady vice chancellor of the greatest university came forward. The party, the group Nahdlatul Ulama, has a unique pattern. Contrary to what we have, a political activism in Pakistan for the ulama, Indonesia's ulama do not do that. Their area of activism is education, health, welfare works, civic sense, moral upgradation of the people, particularly addressing the youth. So, the marked difference that in Pakistan, for example, that is the lesson that we are learning and we have learned from Indonesia, is not mainly focused on legislation, but on Islamizing the society. And I think that Nahdlatul Ulama has made tremendous inroads in this area of activity. So the people of Indonesia, when you meet them, frankly speaking, without exaggeration, you will find them true Muslims in their attitude, in their behavior, in their meetings, in their household, in their ethics, in their educational norms, and in their health facilities and civic sense. But this doesn't mean that they don't influence the governance. They do, but in an indirect way. So they have been, their president Abdul Wahid has been part of the Nahdlatul Ulama. So there is a great contribution of the Nahdlatul Ulama in the indirect better governance of the country. The second aspect that I will try to have a few words on, because I think that the most influential person of Indonesia is with us in the personality of Sheikh Ulail Abdallah. That Indonesia has a unique geographical location, far away from the mainland of the Muslim countries and not part of the conflicts. We all are parts of the conflict. In Afghanistan, different national interests colliding in Afghanistan of the regional areas, then the Middle East, and the recent yesterday's sad event that we are seeing. So this geographical location has made Indonesia to play a very decisive role in making the Ummah united and to come forward for ensuring solution to the conflicts of different countries, because all the countries have great confidence in Indonesia, because Indonesia is not part of the conflicts. So I can very safely say, although it is a little deviation from Allama Iqbal's thought, who considered that if Tehran could be Geneva of the Muslim world, in my opinion, and I say it with all sincerity, that in today's situation, Indonesia can be Jakarta, Putrajaya can be the Geneva of the Muslim world. With these submissions, I once again express my greatest gratitude to the Muslim Institute and to the Indonesian Embassy, and particularly to the guest of honor, our Sheikh Ulail Abdullah, and all of you who gathered together for this very enlightening discussion. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so very much, Honorable Dr. Qibla Ayaz Sahib. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is a person to whom I came to know when I was a student of law and I was studying the subject of international law. And to make it easy and to learn, I just Googled on YouTube and I found a lecture series on international law. And it was very easy and I heard twice, took notes. And since that day, my international law become my favorite topic and my favorite subject. So our next speaker is former Federal Minister for Law and Justice. He's the founding president of Research Society of International Law, a very active thing.
House Bill Service for the country of Pakistan. Dr. Qibla Ayaz Sahab, a legendary scholar from Pakistan, and honorable ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I am again thankful to Muslim Institute for organizing such a wonderful session and for having invited one of our honorable guests from Indonesia and also the Indonesian Embassy and the High Commission for organizing and helping and connecting with the people of Pakistan in various manners. As my young worthy friend mentioned, that my area has been public international law. But alongside public international law, I have a practitioner's experience of a regular lawyer, and my recent preoccupation is identifying the covenantal framework in the Quran, which is again a legal exercise, and one is able to identify some remarkable legal structure, the legal architecture of the Quran. And in that, we have been able to identify numerous personal covenants that Allah has directly with the believers. And in addition to that, there are covenants under the Quran, which basically means that when you say akud, when you talk about misak, these terminologies do not cover merely the historic covenants. They also cover the present day international contracts, daily agreements that you do. They also cover international treaties that need to be upheld by the Muslims. They also cover legislative covenants, because every law of the land is a social contract between the state and individual. So that is covered in the definition of the word misak, in the definition of the word akud, which Quran so strongly emphasizes. So therefore, it is very convenient for a Muslim to identify a commonality to uphold the law in his country as an aspect, an element of his faith. It is an obligation on every Muslim to uphold all misak that are under the Quran, because whether it is a private contract that we do for trades, I am just coming right now from an attempted mediation between two businessmen where they are struggling on a dispute relating to interpretation of a contract. Contract, honorable guest, is so significant from a Quranic standpoint and its upholding that the Holy Prophet emphasized upon it. Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, was not only the lawgiver but also an international law practitioner, because he drafted treaties, he executed treaties, he made use and took advantage of the treaties and used treaties as a basis to create influence, the ghalba that we romanticize so much as Muslims. The Prophet's sunnah is not only to use ghalba through the use of force wherever appropriate as per the law of the land, but also through the smart, visionary use of international treaty negotiations. So that sunnah of the Prophet, that he was a treaty negotiator, has been so taken at a backside, it has taken a backseat in the Muslim community. We do not participate in international global negotiation exercises. Today, the forums of Shura that the Quran so strongly emphasizes have been elevated from ulama, from madrasas, from mosques. They have gone to parliaments UN General Assembly, UN Security Council, UN SCAP, and so on. So all these have become venues of shura, or consultation venues. So United Nations calendar of events for every year, every conference, honorable guest, is a venue of shura where there is a legal compulsion of the Muslim communities and the Muslim states to participate wholeheartedly. So I believe that while the Muslims talk about collective actions and others, there should be a very intelligent collaboration amongst them so that they participate with a uniform strategy at global forums. These forums of shura, these forums where consultations take place, we need to be proactive in that. That was the sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him. We need to excel in the art of treaty negotiations. We need to excel in the expertise that can bring us at par with people who are into a far developed jurisdictions. So therefore, we also have to be mindful that everyday issues that we deal with in our society as traders, as businessmen, as ordinary citizens are tied up with every contract. So if you are a businessman, you are doing a purchase order. If you are selling a house, you are going into an agreement to sell. If you are manufacturing a bottling plant, you are putting on a label. And the covenant has specific covenants. Quran has specific covenants with the entrepreneurs, for the believer entrepreneur. There is a specific covenant in the Quran in which the believer is asked to excel in the world, to search fazl, because the excellence is tied up regarding his claim that he is the Khalifa, the deputy, the vicegerent of Allah Ta'ala on earth. What a privilege, what a declaration, what a remarkable statement to have, what a neon sign to be attracted to. We, each one of you, are the Ashraf Makhluk, the Behtareen, the best. So how do you prove it? You only prove it because if you excel in the worldly role, the role that you have, whether it's the role of a business person, whether it's the role of an agriculturalist, whether it's the role of a scientist, whether it's the role of a PhD scholar, whether it's the role of a lawyer, architect, journalist, whatever worldly role you are in, there is an implied covenant that you need to excel in that role. Demonstrate why you as a species are so brilliant. That will belittle the claim of the adverse force because you were suspected not as good as Allah thinks you are. So as much the trust that the Creator has in each one of us, we have an implied duty to excel. So that covenant we need to uphold. And if we are an entrepreneur, whether in Indonesia, in Pakistan, anywhere, as a believer, we believe in the Quran, we have a complete charter to follow. And that charter includes we have to uphold standards. We have to uphold weights and measures. Invariably, people link it up with just scales. I submit it is a far wider concept. In whatsoever profession you are, the standards, the licensing regimes of those professions have to be upheld. I remember my team is writing an article called The Iron Ring of the Quran, Excellency. In that article, we are saying that engineers in Canada, upon graduation, are given a steel iron ring so that as a reminder of upholding professional engineering standards that they are taught. Quran's iron ring is telling us, instructing us, that we must uphold our trade standards. Whether I am a manufacturer, I am an engineer, I am a doctor, I am a lawyer, my license terms determine the standards of my professional work. Doctor's license terms determine the standards, he has to uphold that. A businessman, a manufacturer, an indentor, an agent, a private sector, public-private partnership framework, they all have to uphold standards. So Quran's invisible iron ring has to be felt, has to be recognized, that it is talking to each one of us that whichever venue you are, wherever profession you are stationed, whatever you are doing, you have to uphold the standards of that work, that function that you are performing. Likewise, we are also working on what we call Maruf, the concept of Maruf, Excellency. The concept of Maruf is traditionally viewed as something associated with the custom. That whenever there is a certain custom, that needs to be conformed with. We argue that today the customs have been codified into implementing domestic statutes, the laws of the state. So it was Maruf way of transacting or buying property in Arabia, in Hijaz, 1400 years ago, when someone would take a bag of ashrafis, put it, give it to someone who is a seller, take the possession, and that would be the Maruf way of buying a land. Today, the Maruf way of buying the land is defined by the Transfer of Property Act. It is defined by the Registration Act. It is defined by the Stamp Act. So the local legislation has become an evidence of what Maruf constitutes. So one can go on giving examples that you and we need to identify in Indonesia, in Pakistan, those laws, those statutes that define Maruf, that define good and bad. Because kindly remember, the sin of yesterday that we in Urdu, people from Islamabad recognize, guna. The sin of yesterday or guna of yesterday is today's offense in most of the cases. So if you look at the penal code of Indonesia, if you look at the penal code of Pakistan, it's a list of 450 offenses. What are they? They were traditionally, before penal code came into existence, they were viewed as sins, guna. Marna nahi kisi ko, hurt, no one should hurt someone, no one should abuse someone, no one should kill anyone, modesty of women, no one should do fraud, no one should be given amana, should not. Today, those gunas which were traditionally viewed are now listed down as criminal breach of trust, as murder, as kidnapping, and then there are refined wrongs like money laundering and so on and so forth, and counterterrorism and so on. So what I am saying is, ladies and gentlemen, that this exercise by the scholars in both the countries need to be undertaken, where we can find synergy with the Quranic framework and the laws of the land that are available. There is sometimes an objection by some of my friends who say, well, why should we obey this law? This is written by the Ingres or the Britishers, or they left by the Dutch. This is not a law of land. This is not Islamic law. This is not Sharia law. So we are not obliged to, and this is the narrative of the non-state actors as well. I submit, and the work that we are doing demonstrates that laws you are able to identify them with reference to the modern framework and the Quranic framework. The word tayyib, just pick up the word tayyib, just one phrase of the Quran. The entire transparency framework, the United Nations Convention on Corruption, which is a multilateral treaty talking about how transparency has to be ensured in various processes of the government, is actually a tafsir of the term tayyib. But we need to join them together to make people, citizens, realize that if they are fulfilling the law, they are at the same time fulfilling the mandate of the Quran, the covenantal link that the Quran tells them to uphold. So if you are talking about Maruf, as I mentioned, as a single phrase, and one can go on talking about such phraseology, but my submission would be that we need to bring this clarity to the ordinary people, that the law of the land that they are to follow, as long as it is not inconsistent with Islam, as long as it is not inconsistent with a specific verse or the sunnah of the Holy Prophet of Islam, it should be accepted, declared, and deemed to be in conformity with the Quran. And therefore the mental intent, the niyat that you have when you are complying with the law will bring you dividends, because we believe in the jurisdiction hereafter. We all, those who believe in Quran, they have to believe in the jurisdiction hereafter. So if you believe that you are doing something complying with the law which is in sync with the Quranic mandate, then you are ensuring rewards in the jurisdiction thereafter. So while you may think that there is an important hadith or a mention in the Quran that do amle saleh. Now amle saleh is also a wonder phrase of the Quran for a Quranic state, or for a state which is based on Islam or democracy. There is nothing inconsistent with that. So amle saleh means good deeds. Who defines good deeds? Good deeds, or ahkam Quran for that matter. Ahkam Quran 200-300 years ago were viewed as morality and ethics. But again today most of these morality and ethics have been codified not only in domestic legislation but also multilateral treaties and conventions. So if CDA, where we sit together today, Capital Development Authority law tells me and you and whosoever is making a house in Islamabad to leave 10 feet to ensure sunshine for the neighbor, air for the neighbor, and privacy for the neighbor, that's exactly what Quran is telling me. But if I'm able to join in my mind or through a narrative that CDA regulations relating to housing, when connected with Quran, create a complete package, then suddenly I am a responsible citizen. In other words, Excellency, a law-abiding citizen is a muttaqi. The muttaqi, the definition of a muttaqi, again my team is working on that, to identifying legal features of the muttaqi. Who is a muttaqi? Of course, Quran has identified what he should be doing, what he should not be doing. He should be vigilant about how he is avoiding the bad and how he is following the good. The muttaqi, when we compare the legal elements with a fictitious concept of a reasonable person, which has been declared by the English case law, which basically means the lawyers here would know that reasonable person is a fictitious person created by legislation, by judgments of the superior courts in cases of negligence, murder, and criminal liability. And the idea is that you imagine an ideal person who is absolutely reasonable. So how will he function, act in this situation in which this person who has transgressed has acted? And you apply those standards and you say, well, a reasonable person in these circumstances would not have done what he has done. So my submission is the structure, the legal features of a muttaqi are mirror imaging the concept of a reasonable person. So today, if to a young man or a young student I tell him, be a muttaqi, he'll start scratching his head. But if I tell him, become a reasonable person, he'll say, yes, I understand what you are saying. So what I'm saying is that approach towards lingo, towards the discipline of the society, again, if I may give one more or two more suggestions in this regard, that when we talk about the legal structure of the state, again, the Shura doctrine controls the outcome. There is an institution of Khilafat, that Khilafat has been there. It's a geographical concept associated with individuals, the choice of people. But then people may choose a different framework. Again, that is a mandate given by the Quran itself. So people say, we'll go for the presidential system. Some people say, we'll go for the sovereign authority. Some people say, no, parliamentary system. That ought to be allowed as perfectly legitimate within the Islamic jurisprudence framework. And those who argue otherwise, they need to be rebutted. They need to be put across this point to be very clearly that Islam permits all kinds of structures as long as you are based on the popular support and the will of the people, whichever will they wish to take, whichever direction that will wishes to go, we have to respect that will. So therefore, the structure of the state is a doctrine genuinely left as a flexible doctrine. We talk of constitutions, there's a concept called occupying field. Sometimes the federal government occupies field of legislation in certain areas and leaves the remaining. So Quran has also occupied certain areas for legislation. The rest it has left to the people and to the generations to follow. Those areas that have been occupied by the Quran are inheritance, contracts, and punishments in terms of administration of justice. The rest, or barring a few more areas, the rest has been left to the people like you and me, because we are all deputies. The deputies are competent enough, deemed competent enough by the Creator to delegate or to allow this mandate and freedom for them. So given that, I think the narrative that ought to be worked on is that the laws that exist in various countries create a discipline, avoid order, avoid facade, which is a larger context. Because the Quran is telling us, having a covenant with mediators directly, that if you prevent dispute somehow, I am going to reward you far more than you believe. Direct covenant by Allah with the potential mediator. So I was in Riyadh in a conference of international arbitrators a little while ago, and I said, arbitration, adjudication of disputes, alternative dispute resolutions are something that falls in this domain. Because if we are able to internalize the sanctity of our own commitments that we make, we reduce a lot of disputes which come to the courts. Because what is a dispute essentially? One party rethinks his commitment, his or her commitment, that's it. Rethinks, revisits what he has agreed with the other party, whether orally or otherwise. So, on the terms of oral contract, we have also doing another work which is comparing Vienna Convention on the law of treaties with the Quranic law of treaty. The Vienna Convention on laws of treaties says it was only applying to written agreements. The Quranic treaty law says it applies to oral commitments as well. So the liability is far more, far all envisaging, and that needs to be realized. Somehow this narrative has not been realized as much as it deserves to be, because the upholding of commercial commitments is crucial for the economic development. And it is so important that when I read this verse of Quran in which Quran or Allah Ta'ala is giving us a tutorial on how to draft a contract, the only divine book that tells you how to draft a contract, because of the significance of the commercial commitments, and Allah knows well that if the believer will honor this commitment, the economy of his area, of his environment, his tribe, his city, his country will begin to move ahead. No wonder, Excellency, the United States Constitution, Article 1, Sub-Article 11, specifically says no one can make laws against a contract. It is remarkable. So while the constitution of that state, which has become the economic might of all times in the recent times, which is US government, what is they basing their entire doctrine on? Upholding the covenant, something that my and your Quran tells us, something that we completely have forgotten about it, something that our ulama have failed to tell to us, that you need to honor commercial agreements. The mandate of the Quran is not confined to religious agreements. It is confined to everyday commitments that we make. So the disclosures that we do, the commitments that we do, ought to be recognized in that sense. Today, when we talk about the number of laws, and when someone tells me, I have friends who says, we need Sharia law, Mr. Sufi. I said, okay, fine, let's draft it. He said, yes, we should do something about the Sharia law. It has to be made applicable. And I said, how would you draft in Sharia language Motor Vehicles Act? The answer is, well, we'll talk about it. So I said, you will exactly write the same thing, what is more or less written. If you were to draft the maritime principles of merchant shipping licensing, yours in Archipelago, how would you draft it in a Sharia sense? And then, well, actually, we'll try and add in the preamble some reference of the Quran. I said, then the operation document. Because, you know, the ships, their way maintenance, the seafarers, it's become such a complex regime, it has to be syncing it with the global community framework. Yes. So therefore, you pick up any other agreement. I remember reading a judgment of the Supreme Court of UK, in which two parties relied on a Sharia law for a private agreement, and the Judge Sahab was struggling to figure out where is the codified Sharia law that I need to apply. There are opinions, there are views, there are different fatwas, there are schools of thoughts, but where is the codified law that I need to apply? And they had an ex-justice of Pakistan Sharia court flown there as a witness, and yet people were struggling with that. So what I am saying is that while on one hand those who want to have a codified Sharia law framework continue to work if they so wish, but in the meanwhile, what exists has to be adopted. What exists has to be declared that it is not inconsistent. What exists has to be given a deeming clause. And if you do that, you bring Quran in everyday life of all the Muslims, whether they are in Pakistan or in where. And that's what Dr. Qibla's council was doing, the constitutional body. Its primary mandate was to review the laws written by the British, over 8,000 federal statutes, 3,500 provincial statutes. You want to scrap them, rewrite them, fabeha. You attempted only in only one or two areas. Barely Hudud laws were brought up, and then there was a parallel conveyor belt of prosecution of the CRPC, so that choice has been there. And the other serious exercise, or the de novo exercise, were done in Muslim family laws, which is, everyone struggled with that. Commissions and after commissions back. despite that very brief law, still it is not free from controversies even today. People question it, people question its frameworks. So, and then another attempt that I recall is the Qanun-e-Shahadat or the Evidence Act. Again, those of us who are familiar with law would know that simply paragraphs were moved up and down in sequence, and maybe one or two provisions were added, and that was about all. So while, as I say, we have due regard for the codification of the Sharia law exercise that may be done, but at the same time, the inherent link of these laws, as long as they are identifying what is good and what is bad, and what is something which is representing the historic consensus based on what is recognized as customary upholding framework, we need to identify all those provisions. And that way, we will be bringing them people within the framework of what we call the rule of law. So upholding the rule of law of any country and upholding the global rule of law. Excellency, lastly, I would just like to talk about few common issues that I think from a legal point of view are common, and especially between Pakistan and Indonesia. Law of the Sea Convention 1982. Indonesia, as participants would know, is an archipelago. Archipelago means a group of islands, thousands of them, and if draw a circle around a group of islands and the number, ये ठीक हो गया 2 मिनट में मुनासिब है, उनकी तरफ से चिट्ठी आ गई है तो मैं अब 2 मिनट तक. So if there are group of islands, you put a circle around them and the water within the water body is lesser than the land mass. It's an archipelago, and you will have an exclusive economic zone around that and a continental shelf around that. So those are another interesting areas where the government of Pakistan and the people of Pakistan and the experts of Pakistan can extend coordination with scholars in Indonesia. The other is counter-terrorism framework. Again, there is an enormous pressure from the UN Security Council under Chapter 7 various resolutions, including 1373 on counter-terrorism, 1267 on Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and so on, where all the countries, including the Muslim countries, are being asked to take suitable measures to de-radicalize and counter-terrorism frameworks. And every country has an obligation to submit an annual report to the UN Security Council. Indonesia has, we have, so we all have to work in that direction with a collaborative framework. And since, as one of my colleagues tells us, the Quran is something that is followed by 2 billion people. Most of them reside in our two countries. We need to take it seriously. We need to seek synergy with the law of the land and international treaties. I thank you.
Thank you so very much, Honorable Mr. Amir Bilal Sufi Sahib. Ladies and gentlemen, in your warm welcome for Chief Guest remarks, I would like to invite our guest from Indonesia, the Chairman of Nadatul Ulama, Mr. Ulil Abshar Abdullah, for the Chief Guest remarks, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man walah amma ba'd. Honorable guests, Dr. Tariq, Dr. Qibla Ayaz, Dr. Bilal Sufi, our acting ambassador of Indonesian Embassy, Dr. Rahmat, honorable guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really honored to be invited into this important discussion and seminar today, organized by Muslim Institute. I come here as a representative of Nahdlatul Ulama, which means literally the revival of the Muslim scholars, the largest Muslim organization in Indonesia, probably in the world. I come here with the word of peace, the word of salam for all of you. There are similarities, but also there are differences between two countries, Indonesia and Pakistan. I will start with little things to start my presentation. Let's talk about certain similarities, which I think is important to be highlighted. There are certain similarities when we begin a public event like this, seminar or discussion. We have tradition of beginning a seminar discussion with the recitation of the Quran. So we have also the recitation of the Quran today. And then after the recitation of the Quran, it's followed by the salawat. You have na'at. This is something new for me, and it's very interesting, the na'at, which means praising the Prophet. So the tradition of praising the Prophet and reading salawat for the Prophet is also a very deep-rooted tradition in our society as well. So, and also we begin our speeches like this with salam, but the difference is that you start with, addressing guests, and then you say salam. In our case, we start assalamu alaikum, and then you address the guests. But anywhere you start your speech with salam. So this is, I think, something universal in any Muslim society everywhere. And I think this is a good tradition because salam basically means, a peace. Muslim should be a peaceful person. Everywhere they meet people, they start with the word of salam, the peace for others. And this is something that is very emblematic of the ethos and the spirit of our teaching, the teaching of peace. Yeah. There are also much more important similarities between Pakistan and Indonesia, I guess. And that is that the larger part of the population, the Muslim in both countries, they belong to the Sunni madhab. We follow the legal madhab. In the case of Indonesia, we follow the Shafi'i madhab. In the case of Pakistan, you follow the Hanafi madhab. But anyway, it's a madhab, the legal madhab, which is a very important legal tradition in both countries. We have also similarities in other cases. We have, I think, a very deep-rooted tradition of mystical tradition, the tasawwuf, the Sufism. You have a lot of tariqah here in Pakistan, Naqshbandiya, Chishtiya, Qadiriyya, Shadhiliyya. There are around 40 tariqah in Indonesia, including Naqshbandiya and Shadhiliyya and others. But the point is that Sufism, as a tradition, as a spiritual tradition, is also deeply rooted in our society. And I can tell you that Sufism and the Sufi people were the people who were responsible of bringing Islam from Arab land, from Persian land, from Indian Pakistan land to Indonesia. Those are the Sufis. They spread and taught Islam to Indonesian people. We call Nusantara, meaning archipelagic, land in Nusantara. So those people, the Sufi people, were the people who brought Islam to Indonesia. And the beauty of Sufism, as I understand, because I am also growing up in a Sufi tradition as a family. I came from a traditional family. and I grew up in a very spiritual family. Uh, I learned a lot of spiritual traditions of Naqshbandiya and Shadhiliya. So the beauty of Sufism, as I understand, is that they have the wisdom which says that, this is in Arabic, lawnul ma'i lawnu ina'i. This is the wisdom of the Sufism. Lawnul ma'i lawnu ina'i. The color of the water is the color of the vessel. Meaning that waters, I should time my speech so that I can speak too long. Okay, how much I do have of time? 15 minutes? I think I deserve more because I come far away from Indonesia. It costs me a lot of money to go here. So in Sufism, you have this wisdom, lawnul ma'i lawnu ina'i. The color of the water is the color of its vessel, meaning that water is basically colorless. That is, water has no color. Water, the pure water is transparent. It doesn't have any color. But if you put water in a vessel with certain colors, then the water will take the color of its vessel. This wisdom is a wisdom that became the practice of the Sufi everywhere. Sufi people travel all over the world bringing Islam, and Islam is like water. Islam that is brought by Sufi all over the world is like water. It's transparent. Islam can be planted in different land and countries. When you bring Islam into the land of Indonesia, Islam takes the color of Indonesian context. When you bring Islam to Pakistan and Afghanistan, Islam will take the color of the vessel, which is the vessel of Pakistan and Afghanistan. But Islam as a teaching doesn't change. Its essence is similar everywhere. So this is, I think, the wisdom of Sufism that is responsible for making Islam being accepted easily by the local people everywhere, including in Indonesia. So Islam come to Indonesia in a peaceful way through the Sufi people. That's, I think, the beauty of Sufism, and I think we are indebted to those people who bring peaceful Islam to Indonesia, to Pakistan, to all land. Yeah. So that's the important similarity between Pakistan and Indonesia. We have a deeply rooted tradition of Sufism and spiritual tradition. Yeah. Okay, this is just a muqaddimah, a preamble, an introduction. Now I will come into the important business in my talks. Indonesia and Pakistan both are two biggest Muslim countries in the world. So we have around 280 million people currently, population. And Pakistan has around 250 million population, right? Currently, around 250 or 40, yeah. Okay. So if you mix both countries population-wise, you will have the biggest, the largest population, Muslim population in the world. If you bring together these two countries, it will become the largest Muslim population in the world. Whatever happened to Islam, it is the responsibility of these two countries. If Islam is perceived badly by other people, it is your responsibility. It is your responsibility. You take a big responsibility of propagating, of doing da'wah for a good Islam. If there is a wrong perception of Islam in the outside world, I think the mistake is in your hand. Because Pakistan and Indonesia are the largest Muslim population in the world. We have a great responsibility. Big numbers, with big numbers come a big responsibility. That's the word from the Batman movie, I guess. Yeah. With big numbers come the big responsibility. We have responsibility of practicing Islam so that Islam become perceived as a religion of peace, a religion that brings peace and brotherhood and sisterhood for all people. Indonesia, this is something that, a lesson that I can share with you all here. Indonesia has been undergoing a tremendous political, social, and cultural changes after 1998. That's the historical moment for us. 1998, the month was the May. The collapse of the so-called a new regime, a new order. This is a political order that ruled Indonesia for almost 30 years, ruling Indonesia in a very authoritarian way. It's collapsed in 1998, and then since then, Indonesia became a democratic country. Since 1998, Indonesia had succeeded in conducting 6 peaceful and democratic, open and fair elections. 6 elections, including the last election in February this year, which brought the current president, the next president, Mr. Prabowo Subianto. So 6 elections, fair and democratic and open elections. Indonesian case, I guess, is a good case that shows to us all that there is no contradiction. There is no conflict between Islam and democracy. I know that there is some discussion or polemics, conversations maybe in the Western media, in Western people. A question was or is Islam compatible with democracy? This is the biggest question that has been discussed after September 11th. The biggest question after September 11, 2001, was whether Islam is compatible with democracy or not. Before that, there was another question as well. Is Islam compatible with economic development? Because there are some people who have a perception that Islam is not a religion of development. Islam causes underdevelopment. Why is majority of Muslim countries underdeveloped, less developed than others? Some people say that this is because of Islam. Islam is responsible of poverty, ignorance, less education among people. I think this is a wrong perception. Indonesian case shows that there are compatibilities between Islam and democracy. This is one. The second is that, and this is also another important question in Asia. There was a narrative, a hypothesis that Asian values are not compatible with democracy. Yes. That there was a theory, right? There was a theory that Asian values are not compatible with democracy. Indonesian case shows, of course, Indonesia is part of Asia, and we have Asian values. But Indonesian case shows that Islam, Asian values, do not contradict with democracy. And I think this is a very important development in our history as a Muslim society in general. Because this perception among other people that Islam is incompatible Islam is in conflict with democracy is very dangerous, I guess. This is a dangerous idea. And this is dangerous idea not because this will bring bad image to the Muslim. This is also dangerous because it will give also a wrong idea to our younger generation. There are some younger Muslim generation who think that there is a contradiction between Islam and democracy. There is a contradiction between Islam and nation state. Thanks, Dr. Bilal Sufi. I think you give a very, very important speech about the importance of bringing together Islamic ethic, Islamic values, Quranic framework with modern frameworks of covenants. This is very important because Islam, you know, and this is exactly your thought is our thought. You make a very important point because we have a very important a teaching in Islam as said by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prophet Muhammad used to say, Al-Muslimuna ala shurutihim. Al-Muslimuna ala shurutihim. And then the ulama add like a sharah, a commentary. Ma lam yakun sharton ahalla haraman aw harrama halalan. Muslim people are bound by covenant, by agreement they made among themselves and with other people. If you strike a deal, an agreement, a covenant with other people, you are bound to follow the agreement, as long as the agreement is not contradicting Islamic teaching and tenet. So, and this is exactly this hadith, this prophetic tradition is a tradition that gives us an argument why nation state and Islam and democracy are compatible with each other. Because al-Muslimuna ala shurutihim. The Muslim people are bound by agreement, by contract. You know, the modern theory of social contract came from Rousseau, from France. But actually we have this teaching, I mean, long time ago, even before Rousseau and John Locke, we have this prophetic tradition that says, Al-Muslimuna ala shurutihim. Muslim people are bound by any agreement and contract they strike with other people. So this is exactly the argument that we use as a Muslim in Indonesia to make a case that nation state is something that is compatible with Islam. I should say something this because there was in 40s, Indonesia was declared as an independent country in 1945, August 17th of August 1945. So since then, we are an independent state. But back then, there was a polemic. There was a big polemic between a nationalist and small numbers of people who call themselves as let's say, Islamists. Yeah? The question was whether Islam and nationalism is compatible. Because, you know, there was some Muslim people who still believe that nation state as a political, you know, institution is not compatible with Islamic teaching because we have our political, you know, organization, political state that's based on our tradition. And some people still think that nation state is not compatible with Islam. But our ulama in Indonesia, they make a case that nation state is compatible with Islam. So that way they support the Indonesian state as a national state, not an Islamic state, but national state. Because why? Because we are bound by a contract, by an agreement we strike, we make with other people, fellow Indonesian, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. So this is first thing, Indonesian case. This is a lesson that I might share with you all, that Indonesian case shows that Islam and democracy, Islam and economic development are compatible. And I believe personally that there is no contradiction. There is no contradiction. As long as we are capable of understanding Islam and Islamic teaching, Islamic tradition contextually. And this is a word that should be highlighted. Understanding Islam contextually. Because we live in different contexts, and we need to understand Islam in these different contexts. And we need to revisit our tradition. Not only revisit the Western tradition, but also revisiting our tradition. We love our tradition, but we also love progress. We love also, modernity, as long as modernity doesn't contradict our teaching. So there is a wisdom in our organization that says, Al-muhafadha ala al-qadim al-salih wal-akhdhu bil-jadid al-aslah. Meaning preserving a good tradition while adopting a new and better tradition. This is the wisdom that is the foundation of our religious life in Nahdlatul Ulama. Al-muhafadha ala al-qadim al-salih wal-akhdhu bil-jadid al-aslah. So based on this wisdom, we develop a certain understanding of Islam that is compatible with a changing situation. We love our tradition. We have a tradition of fiqh, of theology, of Sufism. Those traditions are very important, but this tradition should be understood and revisited, taking into account, taking into our consideration the changing societies, the changing context. That's the religious wisdom that we have in Nahdlatul Ulama. And lastly, this is also something that is important to be highlighted. This month, the Grand Sheikh of Al-Azhar, Dr. Ahmad Al-Tayyib, visited Indonesia. I think in the first month of July. And then next September, Pope Francis of Vatican will visit Indonesia. So the visit of two important religious figures fall within the same year, the year of 2025, at the end of the term of President Jokowi, the current president. I should say this because, as you may be aware, there was a very important development in our religious life as a Muslim, which took place in 2019. In 2019, there was a document signed by Pope Francis and Dr. Ahmad Al-Tayyib as the Grand Sheikh of Al-Azhar, the Sheikh Al-Azhar. The document was called the Document of Human Fraternity for World's Peace, for Global Peace. In Arabic, it's called Wathiqatul Ukhuwa al-Insaniyah Lissalam al-Alami. The document was brokered and signed in Abu Dhabi. In my opinion, this is not a small development. This is a very important development because Christianity, Catholicism including, and Islam are, one of the largest religion in the world today. And I think if there is a good relationship, a dialogue between Islam and Christianity and other religions as well, I think it will be bringing a peace to the world. So religious dialogue and interreligious dialogue is also part of the important dimension in our religious life in Indonesia as well. Nahdlatul Ulama has been at the forefront, right? At the forefront. The difference between, this is a minor issue to be highlighted, the difference between Pakistan and Indonesia is you were colonized by British and you still speak good English. We were colonized by Dutch, but we never speak a good Dutch. when we declared our independence from Dutch, everything Dutch was cut off. We never spoke Dutch language. Our fathers and our grandfathers, they speak Dutch language. They speak. But my generation, we never spoke Dutch English, Dutch language, yeah, because we hate colonial power. So that's the difference between Pakistan and Indonesia. You speak still the colonial language, as we don't speak colonial language. So, interreligious dialogue is very important. Interreligious dialogue is very important because Islam also teach dialogue among people with different faith and cultures. Ya ayuhan nasu inna khalaqnakum min dzakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum syu'uban wa qabaila lita'arafu. The reason God created human being as different people, different nation, different tribes, different groups, the reason is that you know each other better. So the teaching of ta'aruf is one of our teaching, and dialogue is the foundation of ta'aruf. So by this, I will end my presentation. Thanks for your sober perseverance to listen to my boring speech. Thanks. And thanks to Dr. Qibla Ayas, because everything I want to say in this podium have been taken by you. So thank you very much. You made a good point about Indonesia. So thank you very much. And I hope I can visit Pakistan next time. This is the second time I visit Pakistan. So I hope I can visit more and more and more. I love Pakistan. I love paratha. I love Pakistani food. So I will come to Pakistan again. Yes, Excellency. I was brought to a good restaurant in, I don't know where, but it's good food. I like Pakistani food. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Sir, thank you so very much for your kind words. In the end, for vote of thanks, I would like to invite the representative of Muslim Institute, Mr. Malik Kashif.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of our chairman Sabdada Sultan Ahmed Ali and the team of Muslim Institute, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to all dignitaries, excellencies and participants for generating thought-provoking ideas and valuable inputs at the seminar. I am especially thankful to the Embassy of Indonesia in Pakistan, particularly the Ambassador, His Excellency Rahmat in Ditra, for collaborating with the Muslim Institute in organizing this seminar. I'm also grateful and appreciate the Nahdlatul Ulama, especially the chairman, respected chairman, Mr. Ulil Abshar Abdullah, for participating in the seminar. And we are hopeful that the seminar will contribute to strengthening the existing brotherly relation between Indonesia and Pakistan, and help addressing emerging challenges that are highlighted and identify our panelists. And the perspective discussed today are thought-provoking, and I hope that academia, intellectuals and policy makers will further this debate. Once again, I express my heartfelt thanks to all participant media persons. Thank you all once again, and please join us for a refreshment which have been arranged for all guests in the next hall. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Just very few minutes. For presenting the seminar memorabilia, I would request Mr. Malik Kashif and Acting Ambassador of Indonesia to please come and present seminar memorabilia to our speakers. So if Excellency may present seminar souvenirs, I would like to request Chairman Nahdlatul Ulama to please come and receive the conference memorabilia. Cheers. पीछे कर लो. Mr. Malik Kashif, kindly present the conference memorabilia to Chairman Nadatul Ulama. जी. Thank you. Sure. I would like to request Mr. Amar Bilal Sufi to please come and receive the conference memorabilia. I would like to request Dr. Qibla Ayaz Sahib to please come and receive the conference memorabilia. I would request Honorable Ambassador of Ambassador Tariq Usman Haider Sahib to please come and receive the seminar memorabilia. Of Indonesia, please come and receive the seminar memorabilia. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chairman Nadatul Ulama also wants to present some memorabilia to the panelists. So I would request Mr. Amir Bilal Sufi to please come and receive the conference memorabilia from Chairman Nadatul Ulama. I would request Dr. Qibla Ayaz Sahib to please come and receive the seminar memorabilia. I would also request Ambassador Tariq Usman Haider Sahib to please come and receive the seminar memorabilia. I would request Mr. Malik Kashif to please come and receive the seminar memorabilia on behalf of our chairman, His Excellency Sahibzada Sultan Ahmed Ali. जी. I would request Mr. Amir Bilal Sufi Sahib to present some of the books which he want to Nadat al-Ulama. Before group photo, and then I also want to share with you that join us on the tea break, and in the tea break there is special Indonesian cake. I hope you would enjoy, and we are once again very thankful to all the panelists who honored us, especially the Ambassador Fauzia Nasreen Sahiba. She served in Indonesia. Professor Dr. Alia Sohail Khan Sahib. Sorry, we don't have time. Otherwise, we had galaxy of scholars here and the intellectuals to listen them, especially Brigadier Abdur Rahman Sahib, our former Additional Secretary Ishtiyaq Andrabi Sahib, Professor Noshad Sahib, my friend NC, Honorable Dr. Awan Sahib, and all, if I forget someone to mention, we are really thankful to you. You accepted the invitation, you joined us, we are really honored by your presence. So please kindly join us on the tea. Thank you once again. Photo, I would request all the panelists and all the colleagues of Fauziya Nasreen Sahiba, Aulia Sahiba, Brigadier Saab, if you may join, Zamir Saab,